NPR has announced they will boycott Twitter and no longer use the platform for any of its affiliates because they've been labeled government funded by the platform. And they're furious. They say, this is not true. We're not government funded. For the most part, we do get money from the government, but that's, totally different. I love it. Simply put, NPR does admittedly get some of its money from the government. It's not a lot. They claim it's 1%. But NPR was established by an act of Congress. I think that matters too. And they're complaining that they are associated with the government. Here's what they said. National Public Radio is quitting Twitter after the social media platform owned by Elon Musk stamped NPR's main account with labels the news organization says are meant to undermine its credibility. How does that undermine its credibility? NPR's organizational accounts will no longer be active on Twitter because the platform is taking actions that undermine our credibility by falsely implying that we are not editorially independent. Where did it say that? You see, this is really funny. I got to say, Elon Musk over Target. Who said anything about that? Always said we should get funding from the government. You do. This is amazing. Last week, Twitter labeled NPR's main account as state-affiliated media. On the social media site, a label also used to identify media outlets that are controlled or heavily influenced by authoritarian governments. Twitter later changed the label to government-funded media and gave it to at least one other public news organization, the BBC. We're not putting our journalism on platforms that have demonstrated an interest in undermining our credibility and the public's understanding of our editorial independence. Oh, cry about it. NPR's main account has not tweeted since April 4th. On Wednesday, it sent a series of tweets listing other places to find its journalism. Bye. Don't let the door hit your ass on the way out. The company said NPR journalists, employees, and member stations can decide on their own if they want to keep using the platform. NPR's chief communications officer, Isabel Lara, said in an email that NPR journalists and employees will decide on their own if they wish to remain on the platform. Same for NPR member stations, and as they're independently owned and operated. NPR does receive... I love this. NPR does receive U.S. government funding through grants from federal agencies and departments, along with the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. The company said it accounts for less than 1% of NPR's annual operating budget. So what? You're government funded. Nobody said it was more than 1%. Twitter's new labels have often appeared arbitrarily assigned. It tagged NPR with state-affiliated label, and that's what it should have said. Elon, it should say state-affiliated. After Musk participated in a public conversation about NPR on Twitter and then deleted mention of NPR, but left up BBC on a webpage where it described why they should not get that label. Since then, it has given NPR, BBC, and some other groups a government-funded label, but hasn't done the same for many other public media outlets, such as their counterparts in Canada and Australia. In an interview Tuesday with a BBC tech reporter at Twitter's SF headquarters, Musk acknowledged that the British news organization is not thrilled about the state-affiliated labels and asked the reporter for feedback. Quote, "Our goal was simply to be as truthful and as accurate as possible," Musk said. "So I think we're adjusting the label to be publicly funded, which I think is perhaps not too objectionable. We're trying to be accurate." Ladies and gentlemen, I give you the account for NPR. Government-funded media. Guess what? They are government funded. And that is not in dispute. It's a fact. Don't believe me? Well, I literally just showed you a quote from NPR saying NPR does receive... I'm sorry, that's not a quote from NPR. It's from NBC. NPR does receive U.S. government funding. Okay. Check this out. Let's pop over to our good friends over at Wikipedia. No one's ever accused Wikipedia of having a far-right bias, at least not anyone sane. And they write, National Public Radio is an American nonprofit media organization headquartered in Washington, D.C., with its NPR West headquarters in Culver City, California. It serves as a national syndicator to a network of over 1,000 public radio stations in the United States. It differs from other nonprofit membership media organizations, such as the Associated Press, in that it was established by an act of Congress. Heavens me! Funding for NPR comes from dues and fees paid by member stations, underwriting from corporate sponsors, and annual grants from the publicly funded Corporation for Public Broadcasting. Most of its member stations are owned by nonprofit organizations, including public school districts, colleges, and universities. So let's break this down. It's basically getting funneled money through public school districts, colleges, and universities. How much of that money is coming from the government? You can't run that stuff from the government to the universities and schools back to NPR and say it's not state affiliated. It's not government affiliated. It was established by an act of Congress. Spare me. Not to mention, the Corporation for Public Broadcasting is an American publicly funded nonprofit corporation created in 1967 to promote and help support public broadcasting. The corporation's mission is to ensure universal access to non-commercial, high-quality content and telecommunications. It does so by distributing more than 70% of its funding to more than 1,400 locally owned public radio and television stations. Oh, heavens me! Is that the lie? The Corporation for Public Broadcasting receives a bunch of cash. It then gives that cash all across the board to a bunch of different organizations who then what? Pay member fees to NPR? Lies and manipulations. That's the game they're involved in. And you want to know why the real reason that NPR is leaving? Because they've been called out. That's it. Here's what they wrote. Twitter added a state-affiliated media tag to NPR's main account on Tuesday, applying the same label to the nonprofit media company that Twitter uses to designate official state mouthpieces and propaganda outlets in countries such as Russia and China. NPR operates independently of the U.S. government, and while federal money is important to the overall public media system, NPR gets less than 1% of its annual budget on average from federal sources. That's right. They launder those sources. The government can pay various news outlets who then pay NPR, and now it's clean money, in my opinion. Noting the millions of listeners who support and rely upon NPR for independent, fact-based journalism, NPR CEO John Lansing stated, NPR stands for freedom of speech and holding the powerful accountable. It is unacceptable for Twitter to label us this way. A vigorous, vibrant, free press is essential to the health of our democracy. So, meanwhile, while the government is colluding with big tech corporations to silence the American people and NPR is nowhere to be found, they're outraged that a private corporation put a teeny label, which is 100% accurate, on their profile. You know what, NPR? You can shove off. I'll keep that one family friendly. The idea that saying you're government funded is somehow egregious and strikes at your credibility is laughable because you are government funded. This is the game. This is the manipulation. This is the propaganda. It's the narrative machine. Seems accurate, Musk says. Twitter's owner and CEO, Musk, acknowledged the new tag was applied to NPR. He said, seems accurate. Twitter's policy describes state-affiliated media as outlets where the state exercises control over editorial content through financial resources, direct or indirect political pressures, and or over production and distribution. As recently as Tuesday, Twitter's policy page stated explicitly that NPR would not be included in this label. Let me explain something, and then we'll read this false equivalency section they wrote. Do you think NPR is independent? If they rely on government money, then they have to kowtow to the government. If there is going to be a vote to strip them of resources, they will do whatever they have to do to stop that from happening. That's called not being editorially independent. They say those criticizing the new label include Yoel Roth, who was Twitter's head of trust and safety for nearly 8 years. He resigned from Twitter last November, saying, Twitter's decision to label NPR as a state media outlet flies in the face of years of research, all evidence about NPR's funding and governance, and Twitter's own policies and principles. These people are evil. They're evil. Can I say it again? They're evil. They're evil. They are evil. They're lying. I just showed you Wikipedia saying NPR was created by an act of Congress. They straight up say they get some of their funding, 1%. I know it's small, from the government. For him to come out and say it flies in the face of this, it's a fact. Yes, but not all of our funding. Play a game. Play a game. More than 99% of NPR's funds don't come from federal sources. Right, they come from local political sources, right? Local government sources. NPR is an independent and nonprofit organization, blah, blah, blah. NPR receives federal funds indirectly because they play a vital role in supporting member stations through annual grants from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. But those stations also rely on audience donations and other revenue, and they purchase programs and content from across the public media ecosystem, not solely from NPR. A very limited portion of NPR's budget comes from direct federal sources, and there it is. They admit it, but they manipulate it. Here's what they say. They say directly, a very limited portion comes from direct federal sources, less than 1%. But what's this right here? NPR receives federal funds indirectly, playing a role supporting member stations. Exactly what I just said. that the Corporation for Public Broadcasting is going to send out cash to all these other channels, all these other stations, who then send the money back to NPR. And there you have it, my folks. Their own words. So why are they lying? Because they're liars. Because that's what they do. I'll leave it there. Next segment is coming up tonight at 8 p.m. over at youtube.com/TimcastIRL. Thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you all then.